ladies and gentlemen. We have a very special guest here for us on the 83rd anniversary of Pearl Harbor and World War II. And you guys, this is so important for us to talk about. We are bringing to the show a brand new author, T. Martin Bennett, and his book is called Wounded Tiger. Now, I want to share something with you before we bring Martin over, but he puts on the back of the book, remember the past and live for the future. You know, living here in our nation's capital, having been a veteran spouse, the granddaughter of a World War II veteran, the daughter-in-law of a Vietnam veteran, and the wife of an Iraqi army veteran who served for many years in the army, I sit here and say we cannot erase our history. And so what I love about what T. Martin Bennett is bringing in his book is we are talking about our nation's history so that we can impact our future generations. So will you all please help me welcome to the show, T. Martin Bennett. Thank you so much for being here, sir.
Eden, thank you so much for having me as your guest. I can't wait to get into it with you.
Absolutely. So I love the cover of the book, but it's so powerful and it's called Wounded Tiger. So let's first talk about the title of the book and let's talk about the weaving and the beauty written in this book. Go. I
Well,
can't wait
this
to
is a
dive
true
in.
story, and from an early age, I've always loved true stories, and this is the most extraordinary story that I've ever come across in all of World War II. And if somebody else wrote the book, I would love it the same, but it is completely unpredictable. It's just about completely unknown. It's the true story of the pilot who led the attack on Pearl Harbor, whose life was changed by an American prisoner and by a girl he never met. So it's a wild, crazy story, and but it has a very positive ending. And this guy, Fuchida, he had no interest in America or in Christianity, but he ends up becoming a believer and moving to the U.S., and his children become citizens. He had a bitter hatred toward America, and that changed. There's another character in the story named Jake DeShazer. He was an
Mhm.
American who volunteered for the U.S. Army Air Corps, which was the precursor
Yep.
to the Air Force. He
Yep.
kind of accidentally volunteered for a retaliatory secret mission against the Japanese called the Doolittle Raid. Most people don't know what it is, but you probably do. It was the first, counterattack led by General Doolittle. It
Yep.
was highly risky, very risky, and but it was successful in what they tried to do, which was to demoralize the Japanese leaders. Anyway, his plane ran out of fuel over occupied China. He becomes a prisoner of war, and in his own words, he was, quote, crazy with hatred toward the Japanese. And in his blackness and darkness and torture and deprivation, he thought, there's got to be a better way to live than to just live in hatred, and I don't want to live this way. And you'll see his journey there as well. These three stories all come together. So the third is the Covell family. They were
Yes.
highly qualified teachers. They loved the Japanese people. They were missionaries. They also went to the worst parts of the ghettos of Yokohama, where they would serve people. They would wash their hair. They would feed them, and of course, then they would tell them the good news that God loves them. But when Japan started ramping up for war, this family thought, we got to get out of this place. So they went to the Philippines, where they believed it would be safe with General MacArthur being there and
Mhm.
100,000 troops. But we know what happens later. But
Right.
they sent their children back to the United States to complete their education. So that's the setup of these three plot lines, which really have nothing to do with each other, but then come together in a way that is so unpredictable and rewarding. It's like being on a roller coaster, partly in the dark. That's kind of how it feels. So the book is 600 pages, and it's kind of intimidating. I set it on the table. I had many people, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't read fat books. But it does have over 300 photos, letters, documents, maps, all kinds of stuff. And I've had many people tell me, Martin, I read it in a single sitting, for real. In fact, I talked to a guy this past week who had read it 7 times. He said, Martin, I'm going to buy the first ticket to the movie, and I can't wait to see it. So I wrote the screenplay first, then I novelized the book form, which is the verse of how it's usually done. The format of the book, because you're a book person, is a nonfiction novel. Truman
Yes.
Capote's In Cold Blood was written in the format of fiction, but the content was true. Wounded Tiger is a very accurate telling of the story, but I like the nonfiction. I like the fiction format because it's so much more dynamic and engaging for people. And with the addition, excuse me, the addition of hundreds of photos, which took years to put together. People have told me many times, Martin, when I read this, I just felt like I was there while these things were happening. So this is a character-driven story. We follow the characters. It's not about bombs, planes, and ships. It's
Right.
about people and how their lives change. And, it is a story of hope. And I've told many people that that's what this is all about. Hope. If when people lose hope, they lose their will to even live. You have to have that little pinhole of hope that says, well, maybe there's a better life for me. Maybe I can get out of this. And hope leads to faith, and faith leads to love, and love leads to peace. And that's what happens between this guy, Fuchida, who hated America and Americans, and Jake DeShazer, who hated the Japanese and Japan.
Mhm.
And you'll see at the end, these guys do become friends. And the question is, how did they do it? What can we learn from it? The world has been fighting each other and killing each other even today. But someone has actually figured out the solution here. What can we take away from that story? And I can't give you spoilers, but I've had many people, religious and completely not religious, give me the same thing. Martin, this hit me hard. I kept thinking about the story for the next few days. One woman told me with tears rolling down her cheeks, she says, Martin, this has really, really hit me hard because I've hated my mother because of the way she treated us.
Mm.
But when I saw how much these people loved each other, I realized I need to be a better person. So it's a catalyst for change in people, and it's a story of hope.
So as I look through the outline, there are layers and layers and layers to, you said it's a catalyst of life changing, but you also hit the historical piece, you hit the faith piece, and there are so many different layers to it. And like we talked about, and like you just mentioned, we are past the election cycle. We are now wanting to, and we just celebrated Veterans Day, but I celebrate Veterans Day 365, being married to a veteran. And this I want to cite as one of these brand new books that the All American Book Club really wants to endorse. And we are going to endorse this book for you because there's something so powerful behind what you are doing here. And my audience is all about God, country, and family. So I want to applaud you for what you are doing here, but I also want to just give that extra additional inspiration to our veterans and to our military community. Because, as we've looked around over the years, and I'll say it from a personal standpoint, this show is airing in DC, but we live in North Carolina. Most of our audience know that we live here. We're surrounded by Fort Bragg, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Marine Corps Base Camp Lejeune. We're surrounded. And what I'm seeing in our military is this, it's almost deflated. It's so they don't feel as inspired as they used to. And I will do anything I can to support our military families. But I can't help but think that this book that you have written could be that for our future generations of service.
Yeah, I've had many veterans read the book and tell me, and before I say this, I just want to say for the record, exaggeration can be a form of lying. I don't like to exaggerate, but I'm telling you the truth. I've had dozens say it was the best story they'd ever read in their life. I had a
Mm,
guy again this week said, Martin, I've read thousands of books, mostly war books. This is the best war story I've ever read in my life. So
mhm,
it is an amazing and engaging story. I've had both Japanese nationals and American veterans say the same thing. I believe you are fair to both sides. So I'm not taking a
mm,
side here. I'm a historian. I'm just laying out the facts of what happened in the war. And for your audience to know, I did write the screenplay first, then I novelized the book
mm,
form. We have the Kindle book, but we have just released the audio book, which has been in the work for over a
mm.
year. And what we
Yes.
did, because there's three plot lines here, we have three voices. The voice of Fuchida is a Japanese American who speaks fluent Japanese, but with an authentic Japanese accent. And
Mm,
we went through lots of trial and error to find the guy who could really nail this. And I feel it really makes you feel like you're again there. Then for Jake DeShazer's plot line, his storyline, we have an American male, and that's a great voice too. And maybe the best voice of all is the voice for Peggy Covell. She was the
yes.
fulcrum of change in Fuchida's life without me giving away the story of what happened and why. If
Yeah.
you were given 100 chances to guess what happens and how, you would never guess what happens in this story. It's that outlandish. But Peggy Covell is a great dynamic character, and the audiobook is out, and the feedback we've gotten from people who've listened to it are just like they can't wait to go through the book. So it's a fun thing. I'm not an audiobook person because I am too scattered. My mind wanders and I have to rewind all the time because I keep thinking of other things. But some people, I've talked to a guy who listens to like hundreds of books and
Yeah.
he sampled some of these, says, "Oh, Martin, this is absolutely what we want." So that's kind of a
Mhm.
fun way to go through the book for those people who like audiobooks.
No, I'm glad you brought the audio aspect up because there's so many people on this station that travel from point A to point B, especially with all the work that we do. But the other thing I wanted to say, and I wanted to applaud Carly and your team, I am old fashioned. I want the hardcover. I want to be able to smell the brand new book. And I
Right.
want, and don't send me PDF ARC versions, send me the real thing. That's what I want. So I want to thank you for that. Also, I wanted to talk with you about a couple other things. So, we're coming up, well, the 83rd anniversary, as this show will air on the 83rd anniversary of the attack of Pearl Harbor. Are you doing anything specific on that day with the book? Do you have a book tour that is centered in and around some of these bigger world events and things of that nature?
No, we're doing a podcast book tour, and that's what I'm
Okay.
doing right now. And
Okay.
the big, cool, fun thing was simply getting that audiobook done. It was
Yeah.
hundreds of hours of work to do this thing. Because they're actors. It's not just read the book, it's they're
Sure.
acting. People don't, it's
Sure.
like making a movie without the movie part, you
Right.
know? It, it,
Right.
it's a bit more complicated than people might think. So that's the big deal. But for just to let you and your audience know,
Yeah.
when I hear history and about things that happen, it frustrates me if I don't know why it happened. What are they doing? If I'm
Mhm.
watching a film and I don't know why they're doing these things or
Right.
reading the book, it frustrates me because it doesn't make any sense. So for me, I remember in high school asking teachers, why did the Japanese attack Pearl Harbor? What are they thinking?
Yeah.
Are they trying to take over the country? That doesn't make any sense. What is going on? And it was like, well, we don't really know. Sorry, I hate to do
Oh
that.
no, you're fine. It's okay. It's
Turn that off.
okay. I've had
Was
I've
that
had dog barks in the background. You hear it. I've heard it all. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, so what was I just saying?
No, you're basically, why did they attack?
Oh yeah, yeah. So,
The
so the
purpose.
teachers it says that we don't really know, but we beat them up and we won and they lost. So when I went into
Right.
the story, I wanted to find out what was really going through the minds of the Japanese people, and it was quite surprising. In fact, I've had many people who are history buffs say, Martin, I never knew this information about
Hmm.
the Japanese people and the culture and the history, what they were thinking, why they were thinking it. I've got some information there about the League of Nations and that the Japanese team had proposed a racial equality proposal. And it
Mm.
was shot down because the head of the League of Nations said it has to be unanimous for us to accept this. And of course, the League of Nations was a precursor to the United Nations to try to
Right.
avoid and mitigate war by negotiations first. Well,
Right.
the Japanese were highly offended by this, but the person who said it has to be unanimous was the President of the United States, Woodrow Wilson, who, in retrospect, he was kind of a racist guy. And that racism really came
Hmm.
through, and it really it maddened it angered the Japanese people that they were rioting in the streets. This is back in the 1920s.
Right.
They were
Right.
saying they wanted to declare war against the United States for discriminating against Asians. And I thought, you know what? I remember talking to a PhD professor at the University of Pittsburgh. He's actually one of his quotes is on the back of my book, Dr. Donald Goldstein. He's since passed away. But he said, Martin, you know what? All the Japanese wanted was club membership. They just want to be accepted in by the world. And
Mm.
it was kind of like, the big guy telling the short guy in the bar, you don't belong here, go away. And the guy says, fine. And he comes on.
Right.
It's like, well, yeah, should you come back with a gun? No. But should you insult people meaninglessly? No. And that's part of one of the themes of the book. It begins with a scripture out of Malachi, which is, are we
Yes.
not all children of the same God? Are we not all brothers? What I like about that verse is that it's a question. It's not telling you, it's asking you, aren't
Yes.
we all brothers? And
Yes.
and it
Yes.
begins with everybody hates everybody. We demonize our whoever is other, whether it's a political party or whether it's a nation. We demonize them and make them inhuman so we can feel it's okay to hate them. But when
Yes.
you're in close proximity to them, like Jake DeShazer was in a prison cell, he got
Hmm.
to know his guard and he realized he's actually quite a lot like his guard. and they actually became friends in the story. So I think that's what this story is about. It's a story of hope. It's a story of reconciliation. It's a story of learning lessons, like it says on the back of the book. Remember the past, live for the future. We want to remember the past, but we want to learn from the past. What are the lessons we can take away from how Fuchida went from hating Americans in America to loving them, and how Jake DeShazer hated the Japanese. He just wanted to kill them all. He ends up spending his life in Japan. What can we learn from that and apply it to our lives now for peace in our lives, in our family, in our country, in the world?
There's one question I want to ask you as we are into our last segment of this interview. I'd love to ask you, how do you see this story impacting our future generations? And, the reason why I'm asking you that very specifically is that we've had the lowest recruitment in our nation's military since before World War II. And, I sit there on the sidelines, but then I also sit here behind the microphone. And then I also sit here from a professional standpoint with my business, and I'm saying, what are the main reasons behind this? And a lot of the times, I'm going to hold up my phone and say, these future generations are so impacted by how many likes did I get today versus the selfless service that, my grandfather, my husband, my father-in-law gave to this nation. So, how do you see this powerful story of Wounded Tiger impacting our future generations?
Well, as we refer to those of World War II ages, we call it the Great Generation or the Greatest
Yes.
Generation. By
Yes.
the rank and file were not motivated by hatred toward the Japanese. They just wanted to stop them from waging a war of aggression. And once the Americans came into Japan, guess what? They married Japanese women because
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
Japanese men were gone and they
Right.
fell in love with the women. And I remember hearing a woman tell me as a girl, she was in Japan during World War II. She said it was horrible. They were in bomb shelters. I said,
Right.
how did you feel when the war was over? She said, we were relieved that all the killing was stopped, but she was terrified of the Americans. She heard they were just going to come rape and murder and pillage. She said, the first Americans I saw were handing out chocolate to the children. And she said to herself, I am going to marry an American and I'm going to America. And that's exactly what she did. So I think that what they can take away from this is a good American, the model American, is not fighting a war to be out of hatred. It's out of love of peace and love of our brother and mankind. I remember reading about World War II men who were firing machine guns, heavy machine guns at Japanese, and they said they felt sick to their stomach because there was no need for them to die. If they would just surrender, they would be given medical care and food, and they go back to their family. But they had this devotion to the emperor and a philosophy that says you either fight and win or you fight and die, but you never surrender. And that's a terrible philosophy. And the Americans, soldiers, they felt sick to their stomach seeing that. That is a compassionate, good soldier. They're not there to kill people. They're there to establish peace for others. And I think that would be a takeaway for people, for future generations, that if you're going to be in the military, you're out there to help others, not to hurt others.
Yeah. Well, and obviously, freedom is not free, right?
No.
And that's a big piece where I think that it, like I mentioned earlier, that's that selfless versus selfish. And I think that that complacency that we have found ourselves in this modern culture lends itself to that. Whereas your book, I think, would inspire future generations. One thing I want to say as we are wrapping in this final segment, I want to say this is a great Christmas gift to my audience. And we are obviously in the month of December as we are remembering what happened during Pearl Harbor, but we're also headed into a time of the holidays when we are coming together with not necessarily family, but with community to celebrate. And there are many ways that we can do that. But this, I think, would be a great book. I just want to recommend it. I want to recommend it to
Yeah, so
my
a funny
audience.
story is that I've gotten more than one letter or email from people saying, I bought this for my dad, and I started
Yeah.
flipping through it, and then I read the book and I just loved it. So this is not about bombs, planes, and ships. It's about people. It's a people
Yes.
story. And really,
Yeah.
the biggest hero in the story is a young lady of college age who was a librarian. The most unlikely fulcrum of change ends up impacting this guy who led the attack on Pearl Harbor and changing his life. And if she
Mhm.
can do it, then so can we. It's just by simple acts of love and kindness to others.
Well, I was going to say, final word in our final 30 seconds we have left here at the All American Book Club. Final word. What would you like to share with our audience in the sense of Christmas message, inspiration, bringing people back together? What is that word?
That God cares about people. He wants to help, but people shut him out of ignorance, or maybe they've been hurt by other people. But you know what? He still pursues you anyway. Fuchida had
Yes.
no desire for God, religion, Jesus, nothing. He didn't care about that. But God pursued him. He was in Hiroshima. He gets a phone call. He goes to another airbase. The next day, Hiroshima is bombed with the atomic bomb. His hotel was vaporized. And things like this happened in his life. And he started to say, why am I not dead? And then
Right.
he finds out about people who love their enemies. They don't hate them, they love their enemies. And he thought, we don't love our enemies, we kill our enemies, we destroy our enemies. Who are these people that love their enemies? So this is a story of hope for others. And the takeaway is whether you love God, hate God, or don't even believe he exists, it doesn't matter. He still loves you and he's still doing things on your behalf. Open your eyes and have a look and realize he's on your side.
Oh, amen, brother. I love it. Amen. I'm so glad. You know what? I also wanted to mention a final word. I noticed that Mark Batterson and Eric Metaxas, two of my favorite authors and people I do know from my DC circles, endorsed your book. So well done on Wounded Tiger. T. Martin Bennett, thank you so much for being here at the All American Book Club. Many blessings to you and your family, and Merry Christmas to you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely. And for all those who are tuning in here at the All American Book Club, stay tuned. We'll be right back for our next segment. Carly, thank you